in the beginning, and I think we're good. Welcome, Marius.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good that you waited with the recording until I start my introduction. That's always good.
Yeah.
So my name is Marius. I work as a cloud evangelist for Sopra in Norway. I used to be a Microsoft Azure MVP, but then I did a 180-degree turn and moved into the security aspect instead. But since November, like most people here, I'm guessing, I've been working a lot with large language models, LM. So right now I have a lot of different projects working with businesses trying to incorporate language models into their business.
Perfect. Well, so the topic for today is ask me anything about AI. So just to kick us off, and I will just go directly to you, Marius. I will just ask you because a lot of into the Microsoft solutions about AI now, and we have, of course, already known a lot about Open AI in Azure. But recently there were some announcements about Copilot and availability. So could you possibly just do a quick recap of what we are expecting in the near future now?
Yeah, so I think it was first day last week that Copilot was announced that it will be become available in the 1st of November this year. For customers to be able to purchase the licenses, and of course to be able to use Copilot Microsoft 365, you need to have either E3 or E5 licenses, and you need to have a minimum of 300 Copilot licenses to actually get it. In terms of availability, to begin with, of course, it will be limitations in terms of what kind of languages that are supported. So, for instance, Norwegian language is not going to be supported in terms of text generation now when it comes to Copilot. But I know that Norwegian language is something that's on the roadmap and will be coming shortly. So hopefully sometime early next year. And of course, Copilot will then provide us with the ability to be able to ask anything about our data that's going to be indexed in Microsoft 365. So one of the components that Microsoft is rolling out now is something called semantic search capabilities in Microsoft 365. So meaning that today we have like a keyword-based search feature in Office 365, but with semantics, it can actually understand the context, but what information I'm actually looking for. So Copilot is going to be using that semantic search mechanism and embedding all the data and making that available through Copilot. And so Copilot will be available in different parts. It's going to be part of the Office application, so Excel, OneNote, Word, Outlook, OneDrive. Will also be its own bot in Microsoft Teams, which also going to be able to ask questions directly. And we'll also have different features that we can use to extend the mechanisms with Copilot. And Copilot will also be providing with different connectors, meaning that we can, if we want to get other data sources into Copilot, we can also use something called graph connectors to provide integrations with ServiceNow or file servers or any third-party data sources that is currently supported to be able to index and make that information also available in Copilot.
Interesting. Yep. So as you can see on the shared screen here, I have a QR code here, which will bring you to a form, so you can type in your questions anonymously if you want to do that also, or you can type in if you have any questions and anything you want to ask about AI, and preferably related to the Microsoft solutions. I think as this is Azure user group and connected Meetup, but you can also type in anonymously at that QR code. And I have one question received because I published that link yesterday as well. And it was not published anonymously. So Bastian, do you want to say your question rather than reading it?
I don't remember what I wrote, so I remember the gist of it.
Okay.
I think I can repeat it. Just you can say if it's according to what I wrote yesterday evening. No, I have this feeling that this whole AI thing is, of course, it's here to stay, because we already see things like, for me, GitHub Copilot is a time saver. But I'm also feeling there's a lot of premature hyping around it, that we are launching all kinds of products and things AI infused. And well, I think some of the models are not good enough, and it will create maybe more, I won't say havoc, that's maybe too big of a word, but stier på norsk, than we are anticipating now. So my question is like, do you agree with that? That's one thing. And if so, when the dust settles, so I think we're on a pretty hype now, and then like it will go down a bit, like with most trends. When the dust settles, what do we have left that really works with all this AI things, products we get now? So that, I think that was kind of it, Jan Vidar. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty much what you typed, I think. So yeah.
Okay.
So basically, if it's really ready to be used right away, or if we really need to pick out the useful cases and what those use cases are, where we can provide value right away. So yeah, thoughts on that, Marius or Anders?
I have some thoughts, and that's based on my experience with playing around with OpenAI Studio, sending models there and adding your custom data. If the organization using cognitive services, for example, and the Copilot stuff in Microsoft 365, and don't have control on the data that thing has access to, you might end up with some strange answers from it. So if you don't have quality data going into the models, you will most likely get bad data back from the model as well. And that is really easy to see if you use the GPT models in OpenAI services and connect it to your own data. If the data sets and the indexes that service have access to doesn't have quality data, you will get just as bad answers back, right? So that's something we are working a lot with organizations we are involved with, making sure that they know that what kind of data they have in Teams and in the various indexes that Microsoft Graph have access to when this stuff hits the fan. You want to add anything, Marius?
Yeah, I want to agree with the statement that it's well, now we're going to the Gartner hype cycle, right? Where everyone's mentioning AI, and every vendor is saying that, okay, we have a GPT virtual assistant, right? Salesforce announced it earlier today. All the data platform vendors are now, like Databricks, they bought up an AI company, so they have their own data assistant there. Microsoft is mentioning Copilot in every other sentence that we see on their website as well, and they really released Windows Copilot yesterday. So yeah, I agree. It's a hype cycle. But on the other hand, and after the dust settles and people actually understand, okay, because it's not black magic, right? It's just a language model that's able to use mathematics to try and predict the next word in a given context. But what we see now is that, like ChatGPT, right? That was the third generation language model that OpenAI has, and we have Amazon betting big. They entered a partnership with another company yesterday, a couple of days ago. I mean, but now we see, like, we have these generic text models, right? And they give context and understanding. And we see that Google now, they've been training data or language models on medical information and using that to help doctors to be able to better define diagnostics on patients. So I think that we'll have now we have the more generic. We're still in the child phase of the language models that become more and more mature. I think we'll get to the point where we actually can use this in a better context. And secondly, I have companies now that are using like GPT-4 to actually read press releases and information on the web, and are using that as part of their training of new employees. So I see already some companies that are already using the benefits of these language models, but again, it's still in the early phases.
So if you ground the models correctly and use the correct model in the correct case, I think you can get out of this hype in a successful way. But if you just start using whatever AI that are out there without really caring about what it's actually intended to do, you will have bad experience doing so.
Thanks. Did that answer your question, Bastian?
Yeah, I kind of have the same feeling. And I see, especially we are now focusing on all chat, so language-based models, but I think AI in like medical appliance and all that kind of stuff, that's a whole new ball game. And I think maybe that's something I think that's difficult. It's I read a lot about it, and I really like Inga Strup, her book on this and her views on. And I see that question from Julian as well on the influence on society. Is it beneficial or harmful? It's like, and she also writes about the short-term goals and the long-term goals, that they are so unaligned on what we try to achieve with AI that. I think it's a bit of both. So it can both be harmful and on the long term very beneficial for us as humanity. So it's I personally feel it's a hard nut to crack, and how to deal with this currently. Yeah.
And AI isn't new, right? We have had an AI for ages already, but I think a lot of the hype now is about generative AI, where AI is generating stuff based on input, right? But the cognitive services you have in Azure with, for example, analyzing images and all these kind of services, I hope that an outcome of this AI wave is that those models also will become better on analyzing images and not only providing new output, but actually figuring out what something is, for example.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more to AI than just generative AI.
Yeah, and I to understand it, I think you have to play around with it. So luckily, I work in an environment where people play around with new technology a lot. So, but so if I may, Jan Vidar, I can tell a bit about it.
Sure, go ahead.
I work in VIPs, and so we also started with some enthusiasts to start doing with AI. I think the first meetings were with risk and compliance. So what can we do? What are the boundaries we can play around in? And one of the things we do internally is we gave one model the access to our platform support channel. And now we're starting that bot questions on, hey, where can I find, or how do I do this and that? And like the first finding, it was really awful. It was all wrong. It was all old stuff. It was all, but it's really fun, the process to get that bot into like the right way to go. So we say, sorry, you're wrong. This is the right answer, and how quickly it adapts. So I was really scared about like all these data we are giving access to, but it also corrects really easy. So if you take small steps in like giving it access to types of data, you probably be able to correct it, because it's an utopian thought that we can manage our data really well, that we have good quality data. So VIPS is a company that's not even 10 years old, and we have used Confluence as well. There's a lot of shit on Confluence as well. That's outdated. That's not true anymore. But I see we can also like put the model in the right way to because we only use ChatGPT to like give the reply, but we use another model to find the right answers and vectorize it and give it weight and that kind of stuff. So it's pretty fun, and it made me also a bit calmed me a bit down, because I was like, oh, this is going to create a lot of havoc. But if you do it in small steps, you notice it's pretty manageable. If you focus. So
yeah,
2 cents.
Yeah, totally. And also, we have been talking a lot about generating text for the first 20 minutes. But another thing I think will be really good about AI is how quickly you can produce, for example, documents and summarize and PowerPoints, for example. Those kind of presentational documents, which can save a lot of time for especially my smaller organization that doesn't have a dedicated 10 people marketing team, right? And yeah, I think that part of AI is definitely not going to be a hype. Small businesses will save so much money on being able to use a Copilot to create those kind of products, for example.
Yeah, just to add to that, like for me, GitHub Copilot is, I'm not a coder. I'm very bad at PowerShell, but I needed to create a graph query with a big filter on it. And like I was trying, and then, okay, enter, and then suddenly, boom, that was my filter I needed. So I saved at least an hour trying this. And it's small things. And if you get that adapting to that as well, it's really a time and lifesaver for me as an IT pro who did a lot of ClickUps in the past. So it's much easier for me to create GitHub workflows with Copilot on. So I really see the benefits there. Yeah.
I have a question. I think regarding AI, and I think knowing our audience, I think most of the people attending here and usually attending Azure User Group is IT pros of some sort. Either you're working with Microsoft 365 or Azure or both. And I think some like you have been eager and already been trying out and creating stuff. But I think also a lot of people are standing on the outside, looking a little bit in and waiting, and a little bit apprehensive on when and where to start. So, what are you guys' best tips for getting started with AI, and especially in respect to the Microsoft services that now provide AI? I know about ChatGPT, and people have probably most of us have tried that, but not in the context of your data. So where to start? Where can we learn? Are there any good communities, conferences coming up, stuff like that? Any tips that will help people get started on their AI role? If you can elaborate a little bit on that.
So I can start from my personal experience, because as I said, I started with ChatGPT and started playing around with the API. That was like the second step, trying to figure out how can I tune the language model, how I want it to behave in terms of if I want it to be more creative or more fact-based. And then I started tampering with the ecosystem, because it's the really interesting part is that like, okay, we have OpenAI, which is the like the main platform underneath everything, but of course we might be able to, or we might require to connect to internet to get search capabilities. We need to give a memory and some other mechanisms or integrations. And Microsoft, for instance, is working on something called the Microsoft Semantic Kernel, which is their type of integration platform to connect language models with other different integration platforms. So it's I see like either looking at Semantic Kernel or LangChain, which is another open source alternative, looking into how can we connect the language model with other services. So start tampering around. I think that's the best approach, and then use one of the things that I did is like ask ChatGPT directly. Okay, what can I do? How can I how can I code this as a bigger service, or how can I connect two services together using ChatGPT? And there's also the one thing that OpenAI has something called a playground, which is also a good way to learn how the language model works, how tokens are built up. And I can also send a bunch of different other tools that Microsoft has created as part of Azure Open AI, which also can be used to play around, set it up with your own data, integrate it with different sources, and so on.
Good tips. Anders or Bastian, where do you think it's a good place to start, or Martin even? Great that you could join us. As I see that you had some trouble earlier today.
Yeah, apparently my user account was at risk, and you know, managing your own Azure AD is I had to find the global administrator password somewhere around to mitigate that user at risk. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I agree with Marius. Start to play around with the service and use the playground, which is especially if you wanted to create something on your own, like code. You can easily start with that, with the playground, and then you can just open up and see what kind of .NET packages you need, and see the HTTP calls that you need to make inside your own code.
Some good resources pasted in my Marius there, just to reflect. I also have put in one conference that I will follow and look into, and that will be free to attend, I think. And that's the Prompt Engineering Conference. I think it's an initiative by Maxim Salnikov, maybe a few others. So that will be very useful, I think, for those that want to look into that field, that part of AI, which will, of course, is a very important part of AI. Yeah. So yeah, continue. I think you were going to continue, Anders.
Yeah, it's like one thing I regret haven't diving too much into before generative AI hit now is all the previous called cognitive services in Azure, like text to language and image recognition and all that stuff. Because if you're going to do anything more than just analyzing existing data, those services will be extremely important to have in play. So yeah, playing around with them, taking the AI challenge, for example, from Microsoft Learn, is a nice place to get started, to get an overview of the services, and then basically just get started somewhere that hits your interest field, because this stuff will hit all the fields in what we are doing, both as IT pros, as content creators that doesn't work with IT, and also developers. So I think you can basically start wherever you want in those kind of services, and at some point understand what this Copilot stuff is doing together with you when it hits your primary work tools.
About that, the other cognitive services like Azure Open AI is just one of the service that we can use. I recently sat this new exam, the AI 102, I believe it's called. I don't remember the name of it, but what struck me was the most was I was suspecting most questions to be around Azure Open AI, and I didn't get one question about the service. Everything was about OCR recognition, how to do some, there was some semantic kernel and Azure search, but other than that, it was just voice recognition and stuff like that. And so I think they're still focusing on those services pretty much as well.
At least from the learning path and the exam, yeah.
If I know Microsoft correctly, they're going to come up with a new Open AI based exam soon, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and where you will be able to use prompt when you do the exam.
Yeah. So basically, we have to learn how to interact with AI, basically. Yeah.
So will prompt engineering and the prompt in itself be the I see people have commented and have concern that prompts will be the new SQL injection security concern. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, at least you have a tool to help you with SQL injection now, or any other vulnerability, to be honest.
I have a fun story there that I can talk a little bit about. I was working on a demo for SQL Saturday, so I was using Azure Open AI GPT functions to be able to chat directly with my SQL database. So I had a demo on this, and everything worked well. I was actually also using Azure Speech Recognition. I can talk to my database directly. So the first question was, okay, who was John in the database? I did a search and returned a query, and it was fine. And then I asked for something else, but the speech interpretation mechanism didn't catch the name. So what it actually did was go into the database. So using GPT and converting the text into SQL commands and then deleting names in the database.
Yeah.
So luckily it was a demo, but again, it's trying its best to try and interpret the text and the voice in this regard, but still it's it can miss some interpretation and context or information, and then well.
So lesson learned is that we still have to do input validation and access control management.
Yeah, for some reason.
Yeah. Strange.
Strange. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think one of the most important things to remember is that this is still just a computer, right? So if you, just as your calculator, if you give it bad input, you get bad output, right? And in the end, the models aren't smarter than that either, right? So don't trust too much, but rather use them as something that can help you speed up or get to your target faster, basically.
So just apply zero trust, like always verify, never trust.
Always verify.
Prompts. Yeah.
Yeah. Correct. Correct. But when it comes to prompt engineering, I don't think everyone will be doing prompt engineering, but for those who do, it's probably understanding what kind of prompts you should send to the model to reduce the cost and optimize output, of course. So because it can get a lot of prompts if you don't manage that correctly.
But that's also the funny thing, because isn't the goal of those language models that we don't need prompt engineering? That's it feels a bit like missing its goal.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, especially if I end up writing more text to actually get the prompt right instead of actually just writing the text on my own.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I think we'll come to the point where we have these like one of the resources that I linked, Autogen, which is a agent framework from Microsoft, where it's you send a prompt to a virtual agent, and then that virtual agent talks to another virtual agent to be able to, okay, what is actually asking for here, and trying to shape the prompt to be even better on its own, instead of me as a regular end user or human in that sense. So I think we'll have more mechanisms there that will be able to instead of me writing a bunch of advanced prompts, I'll be able to ask a simple question, and we have an agent to pick it up and actually make it better, and then send a prompt directly to language model. So we'll have more fine-tuned features there, I guess, sometime soon to actually make this easier.
So we are a little over the half hour now, so it's time to wrap up. I just wanted to also mention and do a little bit advertising for MVP Day, if you are Norwegian based at least. So we are. It's already started with Bergen yesterday, right? And Tromsø, I think, today.
Yes.
And then we will have some other regional cities, Fredrikstad and Kristiansand, and what am I missing now? Trondheim, yeah, next week. And then we have the main day in Oslo at Wednesday, 25 of October. And the main topic of MVP Dagen this year is AI and KI. Which is the Norwegian translation. I cannot really get used to using KI in that front, but we'll do that on that day. So if you are Norwegian based and had the opportunity to travel or to Oslo or be in or around Fredrikstad, Kristiansand or Trondheim, which are still remaining open places, I recommend that you go there and learn a little bit by AI there as well.
Mm.
So let's wrap up. Any last thoughts you want to share here before we close the meeting for today? Just go and learn. Yeah.
Absolutely, and use AI responsibly, so we don't get another .com situation here.
Well said. Thank you for attending and sharing your thoughts, Marius, Anders, Bastian, and Martin, especially here. We will see you at our next event. That will be a virtual lunch next month, and then we'll have the physical event at Microsoft Office the 7th of November. So come and join us there as well. Perfect. Well, I think we will close it up there. Thanks again, and have a nice day.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.